2 years ago, running a frontier reasoning model cost real money per task, and today you get better output for a fraction of that price. The price of raw intelligence keeps falling every few months, and that's pulled way more people into using AI daily, kind of like how cheaper electricity just makes everyone use more of it instead of saving money. But there's a second thing happening under the surface that most people miss, and it's about who's actually building these models now. Open weight models used to lag behind the closed ones by about a year, sometimes more. That gap basically disappeared by 2025, and now models like DeepSeek, Quinn, Kimi, and GLM sit right next to Opus and GPT on the leaderboards. So the model itself got cheap, but that's only half the bill you're actually paying. The other half is the harness, and this is the part nobody explains well. When you chat with a model directly, you're talking to it with almost nothing in between you two. That's still how most people use AI, just typing into a box. But a smaller group, the coders and builders, use tools like Claude Code, Cursor, or Codex, and those tools sit as a thick layer between you and the model. Anthropic has said flat out that running an agent through one of these tools can cost 4 to 15 times more than the same task done through plain chat. That number alone should tell you something is going on behind the scenes that has nothing to do with the model's sticker price. I tested this myself with something stupid simple. I asked a coding agent to make a text file with the alphabet in it, nothing else. That prompt is maybe 25 tokens. At Opus pricing, 25 tokens in and 500 tokens out should cost you a fraction of a cent, basically nothing. But when I ran that exact same one-line prompt through a harness with a big feature set, the cost jumped to almost 40 cents. That's not a small difference. That's something like 30 times more expensive for typing the same sentence. And there's actual public data backing this up now. A logging study published this July compared Claude Code against OpenCode on the identical model and the identical task, and found Claude Code was sending around 33,000 tokens before your prompt even got read, while OpenCode was sending around 7,000. Same task, same model, wildly different toll booth. That toll booth is the system prompt, and every single harness ships with one. It's the instructions that tell the model what tools exist, how to call them, what the rules of the sandbox are, how to format a file edit versus a terminal command. The more features a tool has, the fatter that system prompt gets, because every command and every safety rule has to be spelled out in plain language before your actual request even arrives. People have actually filed bug reports about this. One developer on GitHub found that typing just "hi" into a coding agent in a totally empty folder with no files and no project context burned about 31,000 tokens. Not because the model needed all that to say hello back, but because the harness attaches its full rulebook to every single message, every single time. And it's not static either. Another report from earlier this year tracked one popular coding tool where the system prompt grew by about 70,000 tokens in the span of 5 days across a couple of version updates. People were hitting context limits on basic tasks because the tool itself was eating the room before the actual work started. So even if you never touch a setting, your baseline cost can shift under you just because the app got an update with more built-in commands. Now here's where it gets interesting, because these tools don't send one message and get one reply back like a normal chat. They loop. You ask for something, the model checks if a file exists, the tool reports back, the model decides to create the file, the tool does that, the model then decides what to write inside it, and back and forth it goes until the task is actually finished. For a tiny task, that might be 3 or 4 round trips. For something like building a small website from scratch, that loop can run for 10 or 20 minutes straight, and every single one of those trips carries that same fat system prompt along with it, plus whatever files or terminal output got added to the conversation so far. You're not paying for one big prompt, you're paying for that overhead dozens of times over in a single session. This is exactly why prompt caching exists, and it's honestly one of the more clever pieces of infrastructure in this whole space. Instead of reprocessing that huge system prompt from scratch on every single trip through the loop, providers let you store a snapshot of it and just reuse that snapshot on the next request. Anthropic charges about 25% more than normal on the first write to build that cache, but every read after that costs around 90% less than a fresh prompt would. So if your harness is smart about structuring requests, most of that expensive overhead basically disappears after the first message in a session. If it isn't structured well, or if something in that cached section keeps changing, like a timestamp or a file path, the cache breaks and you're paying full price again without even realizing it. Think about why that pricing shape makes sense for the companies selling you tokens. A single high-end GPU renting for a few dollars an hour can hold a huge chunk of context in memory at once. If a provider can keep that memory warm and rent out slices of it to different sessions throughout the hour, cached reads become almost pure profit compared to computing everything from zero each time. That's the actual economic reason cache reads are priced so much cheaper than fresh input. It's not a favor, it's just cheaper for them to serve. None of this matters much if you're on a subscription instead of paying per token, and that's exactly why the subscription model took over for regular people. Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google all bundled their harnesses under one flat monthly plan, so you're not watching a meter tick up every time your agent decides to loop 5 extra times to fix its own mistake. You just get a usage window that resets, and you stop thinking about tokens completely. That's a real trade-off though, because a flat plan means the company is betting that your average usage stays below what you'd pay per token, and heavy users on thick harnesses are the ones actually eating into that margin the most. Once you understand where the money is really going, the toll booth on every message rather than the model itself, the whole subscription pricing landscape makes a lot more sense, and picking a lighter harness for simple tasks stops feeling like a minor detail and starts feeling like the actual lever you control.